Ambassador Heyman, first of all, it's good to see you. Thanks for coming to speak with me. And let me start, before we get into our conversation, offer my personal condolences to you as the ambassador from the United States here to Canada for the terrible loss of life in Orlando last weekend. I know you've heard from a lot of Canadians across the country, and I hope in some measure that's helped.
It has helped a lot. You know, the outpouring that we've received at the embassy, not only in terms of the condolence book. You know, the Prime Minister was one of the first to call the President, and then he came over with Sophie and signed our condolence book with some very warm and special messages. But I sat down this morning and I was just reading through the messages that so many Canadians participated in writing. It was quite touching. It's a good time to have a friend when you have a difficult set of circumstances. It's the largest massacre in the history of the United States. And we are facing challenges. But I also need to express my condolences for a loss of life of a Canadian who was kidnapped, Robert Hall. And then, of course, we saw what happened in British Parliament. So it's a challenging time in the world, and it's an important time for friends to be together. And this is an important time for the United States and Canada to be together.
Let's talk about that friendship. And I know you spent a lot of time as ambassador working on trade issues. It's probably, I dare say, probably the thing you spend most of your time on is the trade relationship between our two countries. And in that context, you're taking a bunch of Canadian businessmen down to a major summit in Washington starting early next week. Tell me about that.
So we go out and we speak to Canadians all the time about the opportunity to expand in the United States. And every so often people sit down and say, well, it's hard, the rules, the regulations, it seems so daunting. And we found this not only with Canadians, but we found it around the world. So we created a program called Select USA, run out of the Commerce Department, where we literally bring business people into the United States to teach them the ins and outs of how to do business in the United States. We have a record number of Canadians who've signed up. I'm escorting 108 Canadian businessmen and women to Washington this weekend, and I'm very, very excited about it.
What's the pitch? What's the pitch to a Canadian company about saying, look, if you're looking for a place to expand and invest, you ought to be thinking about the United States?
The pitch is you have 320 million people next door, a $17+ trillion economy, and a great opportunity for you to expand your operations in the United States. It's easy. We're close. We have similar laws. We have not really difficulty from a language perspective. And we're right next door. So all of that makes it easy. Then again, we have different rules and regulations. I said similar laws, but it's not exactly the same. And so people are a little intimidated, and we're going to make it easier for them.
How popular has this become with Canadian companies?
Well, it's up 34% since last year. In addition to that, we had an appeal to do a similar outreach here in Canada. We did it in Toronto. It was so successful. We're going to do a Select USA conference in Montreal.
Let's talk on broader trade issues. The Canadian government is still debating in this country whether to ratify the TransPacific Partnership. It's really the next big trade opportunity for both our countries. You support it, obviously. President Obama supports it, but it hasn't been ratified in the U.S. Either, and it's looking like it may not be. What can you tell me about that?
So first of all, we have no better trading partner in the world than Canada. It's our largest trading relationship in goods and services. We do just about $670 billion, even with the fact that the price of oil has fallen significantly. We've had some currency adjustments. Canada still is our largest trading partner. But we are looking to expand to the Pacific. The growth of the planet in terms of middle class economics and growth is tilted toward the Pacific region. We are looking at 12 countries, 800 million people, 40% of the world's GDP, 25% of the world's trade. We have all come together and signed an agreement. And this agreement is, I believe, a very good agreement. I also believe it will get passed, and it's going to get passed in the United States. I believe once we get through this political season, we'll see good progress here.
Why do you say that? Because you've got, watching the debate in the United States, and it's clearly the political season, so you put those sort of brackets around the conversation. But Donald Trump is saying he's talked about tearing up the North American free trade deal. He says he's not going to ratify, doesn't like the TPP. Hillary Clinton seemed to initially like it, is now cool to it. I think Canadians worry that those who are interested in a greater degree of trade are worried that there's a deeper protectionist sentiment now making its way into American politics. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, I would sit down and say, let's just go back and look at TPA. And when with the trade agreement authority that was given to the president, there was a lot of speculation here that this wasn't going to pass, and then it's never going to happen, and sure enough, it passes. There are a lot of members of Congress that are highly supportive of this. Why? Because the business community across the country is highly supportive of it. And so are a lot of constituencies that realize that there's a benefit. We've had a lot of outside groups do measurements from $50 to $100 billion worth of positive outcomes. Reduction of regulation, ease of trade, and then the fact of the matter is we're all going to continue to trade together. Right. So why don't we set rules that make that trade fair with each other?
They've been making those arguments for months. It doesn't seem to have any effect on Mr. Trump, and doesn't seem to have a great effect on Hillary Clinton. I guess what's leading to your level of confidence that it will A, pass in the States, and B, that there won't be this mood of a deeper protectionism with whoever's in the White House next time around?
I know people here in this country were all excited during the campaign for Prime Minister, and there was a lot of political rhetoric that was being used. I would say don't confuse political rhetoric during campaigns with what will potentially get passed in, afterwards. So I am confident in the people that I speak with that TPP will pass. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, and I'm not saying it's not going to take a fair bit of work on the administration's part. But I have increasing confidence lately in terms of our conversations that we're having that we're headed in the right direction here.
Let me ask you quickly about exit controls. Canadian government has now introduced legislation to respond to a demand that the United States has been making for some time, that you want tracking of Canadians when they leave Canada. How important is it to get that?
I think the term exit controls is a wrong term.
Okay.
I think it's entry-exit shared information,
right.
That when someone leaves a country, they actually enter into another country, and we see that. We're sitting right across the border from each other, but it's just shared information as to who's coming and who's going and where they are. I think this is something that was already agreed to by the previous government, and now we're just getting into the implementation phase. As is the case with the pre-clearance agreement. So we are looking for ways to do two things. We would like to have speedy travel, speedy movement of goods and services for people that are doing good things, that are highly trustworthy, which is the majority of people who cross the border. And then we want to make it particularly challenging for those people who want to do harm.
Let me finish on this. Softwood lumber. When the Prime Minister and President met in March in Washington, they gave their officials 100 days to try and sort out a deal. The agreement expired in October. They gave themselves 1 year to try and find a new deal. That deadline's next week. We're of the 100 days. We're hearing that the talks are not going very well. What can you tell us? Is there going to be a softwood deal or more softwood court battles?
So let me clarify a few things. The United States government had reached out to the Canadian government in 2013, 14, 15, and said, please, let's begin discussing the softwood lumber deal and negotiate an outcome because it's going to expire. The deal actually expired last October.
Right. And
to the chagrin of the United States government, we did not have a willing partner to sit down and discuss this.
So you're saying
March 10th,
you might have had a deal already if the Harper government had been willing to talk?
Absolutely. We would have had at least progress made if we were able to sit down across the table and further those discussions. But those discussions didn't reach any point of serious negotiation. So both the Prime Minister, you're correct, the Prime Minister and the President got together. But the 100-day mark was not a 100-day mark to conclude a deal.
Right.
And so to go back and look at that language was that both the Prime Minister and the President have instructed the officials of both governments to work diligently and give them an update in 100 days.
Okay.
That was the target.
What's the update?
Well, the update is we've had an intense amount of discussions. And while there's still some distance between the two parties that we need to work on, I think we've learned a lot about what each other's industries are at least requiring from this deal, what our states and provincial governments are looking for from this deal, as well as the end consumer. So I'm confident that we'll continue to work hard. There's a lot of opportunity here. The softwood lumber industry is important to both countries, We employ a lot of people on both sides of the border. There are a lot of companies that benefit down the economic chain, as well as consumers. And so I think that we need to reach a fair deal for both countries, and I think that's possible. We've done it before, and I'm confident we'll be able to do it again.
Ambassador Bruce Heyman, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.